And we're live. Howdy, howdy. It's Tricely in Alberta, Canada with my partner, Larry Lever. And today we're going to take you back. And Larry's going to share his journey of being an entrepreneur. My partner here, Larry Lever, is very successful inventor and entrepreneur. He developed his own patented technology, which grew into a multi-million-dollar company that is still using his patented process today in the Alberta oil sands. And now Larry has purchased another company and operates as the Vice President of Product Development for TK Environmental and King Sunshine Solar Systems. And so I'm really excited. I've heard bits and pieces of this story from Larry before, and so hopefully we'll have enough time to take you through the whole journey. So Larry, can you start by talking about the job that you were working and how that led you to creating plastic parts research and later Suncast Polyurethanes?
Sure. I started working for a company because I wanted to become an electronics technician. And so what they started me doing at this company was they said, yeah, we'll train you as an electronics technician. And they put me into this room with a whole bunch of dirty photocopier tanks. And my job was to clean these tanks with bar salt. And that's how it got started. It wasn't really quite the job I was looking for, because I was looking for more of a career, and that it didn't work out that way until it never actually went anywhere. So when I worked for this company, I later became what is called a photocopier technician. I don't even know if that job exists anymore, with everybody having a desktop printer, but my job was to go out and do pre-maintenance calls on photocopiers, which means before your copier has a problem, a technician shows up and cleans it up, so make sure everything is running well. And so on this job, I had to replace a lot of parts that didn't have very much wear into them, and so I think one of the first parts that I noticed that there was a part called a cleaning blade, and its job was to work like a wiper to wipe a rotating drum on the photocopier where the image would be placed before it was transferred to paper, and you'd have a photocopy. Well, this wiper thing would just barely wear out. The actual edge of the wiper would just get cracks that you could probably only see with a microscope. The cracks are so small, they weren't really visual. So I thought, this is crazy. We're throwing out this big piece of plastic, and they would vary in length anywhere from a foot to 3 feet in length, with a large rubbery piece of plastic and usually an aluminum bracket that it was attached to. So they were kind of bulky, and they took up a lot of space, and they ended up in the landfill. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if somebody could fix one of these things and make them reusable so they didn't go to the landfill? And lo and behold, after I had this idea, it was shortly after that the economy went for a downturn in Alberta. This is in the 80s, late 80s, and it was happening to a lot of businesses in the oil patch. And eventually it affected the office supply companies like the one I worked for. So I got laid off with a bunch of other people. And then there was also, it was very hard to find a job. And so after I was laid off because of the economic downturn, so I ended up going to talk to the government. And the government said, well, we have 2 options for you. We can help you out. First of all, there's 2 things that you can do. You can either get into robotics, A, or B, you could become an entrepreneur. And I said, what? I know what robotics are. I've heard of robots, and robotics is kind of new technology with computers and whatnot. And I said, well, what's an entrepreneur? I have no idea. I never even heard the word before. And they said, well, if you have an idea and you think the idea could make some money somehow, well, basically an entrepreneur takes an idea and turns it into a business, which usually makes money. The entrepreneur doesn't necessarily have to turn it into a business, but the entrepreneur can work with somebody who's good at business and take it to the market. And so it was ironic because I kind of was interested in robotics at the time. Excuse me. And I told him that, but I said I was just working for a company and I had this idea too where you could take this, and I explained to the person what it was, and they said, well, it sounds like a good, that's all you need to get into this program. And so robotics was, they were both programs that at NAIT, I believe, the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology, and I was funneled into the entrepreneurship one. And they said, well, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a very hard course, so good luck. And off I went, and I had my school day start, and ended up going to the first day of school. And I told the teacher what my idea was, and the professor, and we were being instructed by a couple of guys who were both millionaires. And they were entrepreneurs that started with nothing, and they had made a really large amount of money doing what they do. And so it was good to have that sort of a educational platform to begin with, because these guys knew what they were doing. So that's basically how I got in. So within the first 3 weeks of this program, it was so intense that a big part of the job is you had to find ways of solving problems. So if you had any kind of stumbling blocks, they would call them, you'd have to find a way to get over the stumbling block in order to continue with your business. And the point of the business was really to prepare a business plan. So here I am with an idea for a product, but I don't even know how to make it. So because I was a student at school, I was allowed to go to any research facility that was run by the government and work as a student in the research facility. So there was something called the Alberta Research Council back then that was run by the provincial government. And so the teacher said, okay, you'll be able to go into here and work with scientists with your idea until you get to the next stage. And this was all part of I think it was a 3-month course. And in the first 2 weeks, we had lost 2/3 of the class because they couldn't really handle the pressure. Because, like I say, it was a lot of hard work and a lot of pressure to meet the deadlines in order to get your product to the market. So at the Alberta Research Council, over the next 2 years, I invented a process of actually taking the photocopier cleaning blade and abrading it, sanding it down, and then attaching new material that it was originally made with to the edge. So it was almost like retreading a tire, a very similar process. And we tested it in a photocopier after it was done. And this was months after I had completed the program, because I continued on with all the other aspects of the business without having the finished product. But the teacher believed that I had what it took to make the product a reality. So it was, I think the greatest thing that happened was I met with one of the professors at NAIT to start with before the Alberta Research Council. I told him what I wanted to do, and I still remember his words as if it was yesterday. He says, "This has never been done before, but it doesn't mean that it can't be done." And I went away from that meeting thinking, yeah, that's right. Just because something's never been done before doesn't mean that it's not possible to do. And so I just stuck with it for a long time and went through a lot of experiments at the Alberta Research Council to figure it out. And then the day actually came where I went in for to see the results of one of my experiments, and I popped this plastic piece out of the mold, and I looked at it, and it was all perfect. And I actually said the word "Eureka!" I've done it, just like I had read so many inventors had done. I actually said that phrase, and so from that point on, um, I had to learn quite a bit about patents and how patents work, because this had never been done before. It meant that it didn't exist, and apparently after going through the patent process with an attorney, I learned that the product did not exist in Canada, and so I was eventually granted a patent for this invention in I think it was 1990. No, yeah, 1991, I believe the patent was issued.
So yeah, that's awesome, and I just really appreciate the amount of wherewithal it takes to actually take action on an idea, because so many of us have good ideas and we let like small obstacles prevent us from moving forward or taking any action on the ideas that we have. And it's just really interesting, I think, if you could explain to people how the patent was then used and what you had to go through in order to turn it into like a saleable product. Because I know from what I know of your story that there was a transition from starting one company and then rolling it over into another company, and why that had to happen, and just leading up to what was all involved with that process of starting the company once you had the patent in place.
Sure. Well, the nice thing about patents is that they grant you 19 years in order to make a monopoly off your idea. And so I thought, well, that's a lot of time. I don't have to get at this right away. And so I took a few years to dabble in some other business ventures that were successful, not based on uh, technology, but they were more based on the entertainment industry. And I was successful at that based on what I had learned at the Nate Center for Entrepreneurship. So once I was done learning some of that and learning the ropes of being in business, I decided, okay, now is the time for me to do something with this patent. And this is about 5 years later. And I met with a couple of friends of mine. I thought, okay, well, I'm going to start making these cleaning blades at the start. And the photocopier business had changed so much in the time that I was away in the entertainment industry, that this part was not really a valid part anymore in the office equipment. So they had changed things quite a bit. And so I thought, oh, okay, well, that's good. They're not throwing this much stuff away, and so what am I going to do now? And I met with a couple of buddies of mine over some beers, and I was talking to them about this idea that I had, and they said, well, why don't you look at the, one of them said, well, have you ever looked at the oil patch? Because they use a lot of parts in the oil patch. And I said, no, I don't know anything about oil exploration or that industry at all. I don't like it. It's not something I like, because I was more into solar power and wind power and alternative types of making power. Anyways, I had heard so many stories about the oil patch and how it affected the environment, so I wasn't too keen on it. However, I was in a place right smack dab in the middle of oil country in Alberta, and I thought, okay, well, it looks like I don't really have a lot of options with this technology. So I called up another friend of mine who worked in the oil patch, and he told me about a part called a pipeline pig. And it's a tool used for cleaning out pipelines, the inside of a pipeline. So that was the point where I think me and my two buddies I met with originally, we decided to start a company. And so we started a company called Plastic Parts Research Incorporated and started looking for more of these parts. And so I believe it was my other friend who turned me on to the thing called a scraper cup, which was part of a pipeline pig, they call them. There's these tools that go down a pipeline and they clean them up and measure them. They do a whole bunch of different things. But they had a plastic on it that was identical to the plastic that was used on a photocopier cleaning blade. I thought, well, this is great. I can use my same stuff that I work with the photocopier cleaning blade and maybe repair one of these pipeline pigs. And so my two friends that I started the business with, they were more interested in other things. And so we kind of parted company, and I thought, well, I'm going to keep going with this. And what I did was I met with a pipeline company in Alberta that was quite large. I thought I might as well start with the biggest one. I went to talk to them, and they agreed to finance a project to see if my technology actually worked. So I told them how much it was going to cost. They put together a proposal, which I spent a lot of time on. And I learned later that when you're dealing with the oil patch or the companies in the oil and gas industry, that you really don't have to be all that concerned about the nickels and dimes. They don't care about the numbers that much when it comes to new technology. A lot of them just want to be the first to try it. So I went into it with a proposal for, I think it was $20,000 or $30,000, but I could have probably asked for $500,000 and gone into a big operation. They would have been fine with it. And anyways, I took one of their very large parts, much larger than a photocopier cleaning blade, and it was called a scraper disc, and it was from a pipeline pig, and it was 48 inches in diameter. So I thought, wow, this is going to be a project to build. I had to think of how am I going to do something on this large of a scale from working with something that was this long. And I ended up putting together all the equipment, pretty much custom made everything, had to get some fancy industrial machines to move the things around because things were going to be a lot heavier than carrying this little blade around a laboratory. So ended up in the shop and with lots of equipment and did the project. And the project went a little longer than expected. It went about 6 months rather than 3 months, but I told them I was going to get it done. And so we continued on. They gave me a little bit more money to carry me over to the completion, which was awesome. And because they had seen that I was making some really good process, but I wasn't 100% with it. And then after about 6 months, I had actually completed it and made them a product that they could actually put onto the tool and run into a pipeline, run down a pipeline. So they came with some people in suits came to the shop after the project was completed, and they looked it over. They examined the part that I had rebuilt or repaired and tested the bond and stuff like that. Took a whole bunch of pictures, and then they left. which I thought was kind of strange because I was expecting them to say, okay, well, you'll have to get together and start rebuilding these things from all our lines for pipelines. That all they really wanted to do was to have this thing almost like a trophy, I guess, as being the first one done. And then word got out, I guess, of what I had done. And I had contacted another big pipeline company, and they had already heard about this job that I had done. I thought, well, that's kind of odd. And apparently a lot of the pipeline companies, they all know each other. They sometimes refer to it as an old boys club in Alberta, how the oil and gas industry works. And I kind of learned that right off the bat is that everybody knows what's going on as far as technology goes. So this other company I went to talk to, I said, listen, I did this, and I can do the same thing for your company as well. So they had things that weren't quite as big. They were quite, they're only half the size. So I thought, that's cool. I can use the equipment that I used for the first project, because I was in business now. That first company paid for all my equipment and gave me lots of money to pay rent and all that stuff. And so I just started working on another project for this other company. And that's when I actually started making money, because I made 2 parts for them, and they didn't just come and take pictures. They took off with these things and they said, we're putting this in the pipeline tomorrow. And I said, well, that's great. This is really what I want to do. And of course, they realized why we were doing it was so that these parts weren't ending up in a landfill as scrap, because they don't biodegrade. They're a type of plastic that just sits in the landfill forever. They're very tough. It's a very tough plastic. And so they called me back a few days later and said, these things work. You did a good job. They're actually working better than the ones that had worn out. So I was repairing these things, these pipeline pigs, and they were actually outperforming the original equipment manufacturer's tools. So they said, we're going to start a program. And then that's when things really started going gangbusters, because they were bringing me these things every week in order to repair. And I had to actually get my dad to come in and help me out with production, because he wasn't doing that much at the time. And so I ended up making about $3,000 a day for a few months, and it was great. And then it just got a little bit too much, and so and things would fluctuate in the pipeline industry as well. So after this project was slowing down, I thought, well, I'm going to have to do something else. So I started finding other parts that weren't as sophisticated, but just about as large. And the revenue started dropping a little bit. And I thought, I got to do something here, or else business is going to run out. So I had talked to another friend of mine who was in business. Excuse me, and he was interested in what I was working on, because he knew a lot about patents and how powerful they are. When you have a patent, you control the ball, as they say. So we ended up starting a new company, and we did something called a rollover agreement, which was the plastic parts research with all their equipment. All the equipment of that company and contracts were rolled over to this new company that was bigger than my company, and it had employees and directors and investors. And so my job there was basically to set up the company. And then after I set up the company with the new owners, it was very stressful too. I'll never forget having to meet all these investors, because I wasn't really comfortable talking to people of great wealth. A lot of these people were multimillionaires, and I just didn't move in those circles. So I remember we went to this dinner to meet one another, and they were all interested in meeting me. To see what kind of guy I was, to make sure I wasn't some kind of flake that was going to take their money and run, or something like that. So, well, what ended up happening is that I explained to them how long I was doing this and how it was going to work and help save the environment, or keep a lot of stuff from going to the landfill with the more parts that we could rebuild. So we ended up, and I was just sweating bullets. I don't remember ever being in a meeting like that before, where I could feel beads of sweat rolling down my back as I was explaining myself to these millionaire investors. And it was a good learning experience, because it was something I had to do. It was necessary in order to get to the next level of this business. So today, after many years, well, I should continue on with the Suncast story. The company was called Suncast Polyurethanes, the new company, and my job there was to find new applications for the technology. So I spent a lot of time on the phone and on the computer, and the internet was still relatively new, so it was a bit of a challenge to find companies that had similar tools. But we ended up actually sticking with the oil and gas industry, and I found another part, a really, really big part that was really expensive, used up in Fort McMurray as part of their tailings operation. And this was for one company. I'm not going to mention who the company was, but they used a lot of them because there's only a few companies that really operate Fort McMurray. You can count them on one hand. And so I went up to Fort McMurray, and it was really cold. I remember it was like minus 45 or something crazy. And I went to pick up one of these big parts. They were all frozen together, and so they had to bring over this machine, break them apart. And then we hoisted them into the pickup truck I was driving, and I drove back to Edmonton with these parts for me and the other employees of the company to examine and figure out what we were going to do with them to fix them. So it didn't take long to figure out how the process would work. We had to buy some new equipment in order to handle the size, and we started rebuilding these things and making a lot more money for the company because the parts were used quite frequently. And today, in 2016, they found, I left the company. Actually, after this discovery, they realized, well, Larry's a kind of an unproductive worker. He's really good at what he does as an inventor, but the company became very routine, and I'm not a routine kind of person. I'm always getting ideas, and so I wasn't meant to go into work and do the same thing repetitively day after day. I lasted about 2 weeks doing that, and my boss, or my partner, the CEO said, you know, I think it'd be better if we just paid you to stay at home. And so at that point, they just basically paid me to just go home and stay at home and think of new ideas. So it was kind of a weird thing because you have to be motivated to do stuff. And so if you're not motivated to do stuff, your mind will stray, and especially if you're not under the gun to make money. I was being paid to stay at home, and I was being paid a lot. And so I would dabble into things that really didn't have a big market. And where can I go with the Suncast story? I think that's pretty much it. Now, today, the company is still operating with a lot more employees, and I since sold out of the company after, I can't remember when it was, but I had become a little disheartened because the company was doing so much work with the oil and gas business and not looking at other areas where these parts could be used. Like the process could be used to repair something as small as a widget or like a rollerblade wheel. However, they weren't interested in doing that kind of business. So I said, I've had enough, and I was bought out of the company. Actually, a lot of the other owners kind of bought out, sold their shares at that moment in time. And then it was on to what I'm doing now, is where I am today. So that company is still going good and strong using the same technology that I invented years ago. And now I am with King Sunshine Solar Systems, and I've come up with more unique ideas for this company as well. And we're just in the process of implementing some of this new technology right now.
So the reason that I wanted Larry to share this whole story with you, and I want him to talk a little bit more about starting out at the research facility where he was working on his project. But anyway, the reason why I wanted Larry to share this stuff with you is because we have a powerful, all-encompassing vision for the future of humanity. And we had a lot of technical difficulties on Monday, but next Monday we're going to be touching on again what that vision is. And basically what we want to see happen is we want to see the entire workforce being replaced with robots, starting with the most dangerous jobs that human beings are doing today. And for me, this story that Larry shares about all of the things that he went through with his past company is evidence that we can do this, that we're going to be able to implement these solar power robots to basically take over all the menial jobs like cleaning toilets and stuff that people don't want to do. So on Monday at the same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, we'll be getting together again, and we're going to be talking about these solar-powered robots and our vision for freedom for humanity from manual labor of all sorts. And so I wanted you to go back a little bit, Larry, and I wanted you to kind of discuss when you first came up with this idea of bonding plastic to plastic, how that how people responded to that. And then also there was that story about the turntable. I just thought that that's really powerful story. So if you can go back and touch on that stuff, that'd be really great.
Sure. Okay. Well, when I after I talked to this professor at NAIT, going back to what I was saying, he told me that what I wanted to do had never been done before, but it doesn't mean it can't be done. After that, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to continue on with this idea. I had to do a lot of research on how to do it. So first of all, I wanted to see, okay, well, has this been done before? Is somebody already doing it? And so what I did was I did some investigating, and I found there was companies that were working, like I said, similar to retreading tires. The way they retread tires is they take an old tire, strip off the worn stuff down to the, I can't remember what it's called, but the main part of the tire, and then they attach with glues and heat new tire tread to it. They do this for semi-trailers and stuff like that. And so, but that was a rubber material. It wasn't working with plastic. And so when I talked to them, I said, well, will your stuff work with any type of plastic? And they said, no, you can't do it. It cannot be done. You cannot bond plastic. You can only bond rubber to rubber. And I said, well, have you ever tried it? And they said, well, we're in the rubber business. But we know companies that are trying it. They've worked with primers, and the primers always fail on them. And I thought, oh, well, that's not good news. Maybe there's another way of bonding it. So I would talk to suppliers of the materials for the plastic, and they would tell me the same thing. I told them, and I was talking to the companies that actually manufactured the raw materials. And I told them what I was trying to do, and they said, don't bother. We've tried it. We've been in this business since we invented this type of plastic, and you can't do it. You cannot bond plastic to plastic. It's impossible. So, and I was getting this daily. I was getting this kind of reaction while I was trying to figure out how to do it. And so when I started working with the scientists at both NAIT and at the Alberta Research Council, they were way more open-minded than the suppliers of raw materials. These guys were like very well educated, and they understood because they were inventors themselves. A lot of these scientists had held patents and knew what it meant when something didn't exist. It didn't mean that it's not going to exist someday. So they gave me a lot of confidence, and basically every time I went into work on the project, they were like, "You'll do it." It's just, we don't know how you're going to do it, but you'll do it. And so, yeah, there was a lot of negativity about trying to rebuild these plastic pieces, and not a lot of optimism that it could be done. So I think that answers that part of the question. Sorry, what was the second part you were asking?
That story about the turntable that you built.
Okay.
I think there was tears or something.
Oh yeah. When I was working for the plastic parts research, and I was doing a job for the very first job for the first project, I had to figure out how to support something on a large turntable so that this 48-inch giant piece of plastic would be able to turn while I was pouring this plastic into a mold to repair the part that had worn away. And I talked to a lot of different businesses in the area and asked them, how am I going to, what am I going to use for this turntable? And they said, well, you can use metal, but if we cut the metal, then the metal's going to warp and it's going to be bowed and stuff. And okay, well, that's not going to work. So I ended up talking to some concrete people, and I thought, well, maybe if I make it out of concrete, it'll be fine. I didn't know anything about these materials. I was a pretty young guy and just kind of out of school experimenting with stuff that I knew nothing about, except my dad had quite a bit of information and gave me some guidance as to where to turn when I was stuck. He still does that for me today. So the turntable, I ended up getting something called mortar, and mortar is a type of concrete that you could pour it. It's not as thick as concrete. It's more almost like a cake batter, or pancake batter, I should say. And I ended up making this mold for it. It was basically a big giant round wall, and I put plastic down, and I poured this mortar, which was about 2 inches thick, and it cured up or it hardened up into concrete, as they say, or mortar. I guess I can't remember the terminology exactly, but I spent a lot of time making this big giant round turntable, just like on an old record player, like a turntable, and it would spin just like a record player. So everything worked on it. I thought I did it. I had the wheels underneath it. It spun just like a record player. I thought, this is awesome. Okay, I can continue with the project. I can start working on the other part of the project, was to start repairing this 48-inch scraper cut. So I had the turntable set up, and it was on these wheels. And a part of the process was an oven is involved. And so this turntable had to sit on the inside of an oven. And I was starting to run behind schedule here for this big company. I thought I better start getting some success here and start moving forward so I can actually do the work. So I had this other equipment built to make an oven, and I had a friend come in, did all the wiring of the heating elements. So it was an oven that was 6 feet in diameter and about 2 feet tall. And this turntable sat on the inside of it because the turntable had to spin inside the oven while the oven was under full vacuum. So now I know it's called a vacuum oven. Didn't even know what a vacuum oven was back then, but they used vacuum ovens for a lot of processes. So I'm testing out the turntable. It's spinning around. I can see it through the window, and the heating elements were heating up. Then I noticed for some reason the window's getting all foggy. And I thought, why is it getting foggy? There's no water in there. It doesn't make sense. So I ended up not worrying about it too much. But I let the oven heat up a little bit more, and it was still turning. So I shut it down, and I noticed it was kind of moving a little slower. And I thought there's something wrong with this. So I turned off all the heating elements in the oven, and I opened up this big giant vacuum chamber lid to examine the turntable. And keep in mind, I've been working on this turntable for a good 3 weeks, putting it together. And I lifted up the lid and I went to touch the turntable with my hand, and it just crumbled like putting your hand on a big cracker. It just my hand basically went right through the thing, and it just crumbled like a sandcastle would crumble. And I couldn't believe it. I thought, oh no, this was the only solution I had for the turntable. It has to work. And so I sat down on the edge of the machinery, and I just put my hands over my eyes, and I didn't start bawling, but it was such an emotional moment that I was crying. Tears were rolling down my face because I did not have a solution to what had happened. And after, it didn't last long, it was only about 10 minutes, because I knew I had to come to my senses and get back to work on the project. So it was back to the drawing board, as they say. And that was a turning point in my life, because I realized, okay, well, something didn't work. You spent a lot of time on it, and it failed. So what do you have to do? You got to make a new plan to make this thing work. So I went back to designing another type of turntable, and believe it or not, ended up getting one made out of steel, which of course was bowed. It warped just like the welders said it would, because heat will make the metal weld. And I thought, or bow. I thought, well, what if I could get this thing cut out in a circle and not have it bend? Maybe they can cut it with something else. And then there was a newer technology that was, I don't know how new it was, but to me it was new, and that they called it water jet cutting. And that was the solution. They could take a large piece of metal, a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch thick. I don't remember how thick it was, but they could cut it using water, and water was cool. And I should mention that the turntable had to be really flat. It had to be flat in order to make the repairs to the round scraper cut. So it was an emotional moment when the concrete or the mortar turntable crumbled down into nothing, and it took me a long time to clean up the mess. But because that happened, for some reason, the water jet cut turntable, it worked perfectly, and I believe it was meant to be, because that problem was solved probably within a week. It only took about a week to come up with it. I contacted the company. They did all the work, so it was easy. Something very important for everybody to remember, that when things get hard, it's not necessarily the right thing you're working on. So sometimes you got to step back when things are getting hard, and you have to rethink and come up with a new plan, which is easy. And this was an easy fix. That's
Terrific.
the story of the crumbled turntable.
Terrific. So we got about 10 minutes left. So I just want to wrap up by telling you about the next event that's coming up. Right after we end the Hangout, I actually have to tell you guys about this awesome mastermind that's going on for internet marketers. And it doesn't really matter what business you're involved with. I pretty much guarantee that if you join us on this hangout that's coming up in just under 10 minutes, you're going to learn some valuable information that will help you progress with whatever business that you might be working on. It's pretty cool. There's going to be some people that have been able to generate like $1 million, 6- and 7-figure incomes on the internet using the system that I've been using for like blogging and stuff. So if you happen to be on our free energy page, there's a button below the Hangout that you can click that will take you to this all access training. And I don't know that there probably will not be a replay, so it's probably pretty important that you get on it with us live right away. So once we leave here, Larry and I will be hopping onto that Hangout to see what's going on in the wonderful world of internet marketing. So if you are not living under a rock, you probably realize that people all around the world are cashing in online to the tune of billions of dollars. It's pretty amazing, and there's all kinds of opportunity all over, from Facebook to Google to Skype, all these different platforms and social media outlets that can be leveraged for a business. Because the fact of the matter is that all and every business is made, the marketing can make or break you. Like when you look at something like soda pop, well, there was probably 100 different companies that all sold basically the same product, which was a can or a bottle of carbonated beverage, right? And they had all different like variety of recipes or all different things. But what allowed companies like Coca-Cola and Pepsi to rise to the top to become the like household names that they are today is that those brands were able to effectively market the product. So internet marketing is just totally a disruptive technology. I've said this before, but there's been reports of like hundreds of Walmart stores closing, of like Sears, which is like he has a hugely long history of being a retailer around in North America, is looking at possible Chapter 11, and it's just a sign of the times because everything is transferring from a brick and mortar economy to click and order. So the reason these stores and longtime retailers are closing down is because people are making their purchases online. 10 years ago, it was like a big deal for people to put their credit card information onto a website. Today with sites like Amazon and eBay, it's pretty much like just a natural reaction that people are just naturally putting their credit card into these sites and making purchases. And what you may not realize, I didn't realize it, but whenever you make a purchase online, typically there is someone behind the scenes, referred to usually as an affiliate, or who markets the product. You can do affiliate marketing for like Walmart even and sell the things that they have in their store on a website, and you will collect a commission. So basically, whenever anybody makes a purchase, whether it's from Amazon, eBay, there is probably a marketer somewhere behind the scenes that is earning a commission off of that sale. And so it's just an endless amount of opportunity for people out there that are interested in earning extra money from home in their spare time, or people that want to get rid of a job and be full-time selling products on the internet. And basically absolutely the best tool that tools I should say, that I have discovered for being able to generate income online is this blogging system. And so when you click the button below the Hangout on the freeenergy.tc page, it will take you to our special Hangout, very similar to what we're doing here, except for there's going to be people featured on there who have already generated 6- and 7-figure incomes on the internet, that will be sharing strategies and techniques that are going to play a vital role in our vision of setting humanity free by replacing the workforce with these solar power robots that we want to develop a mastermind and create for people. So basically, our online commissions that we make from being a part of this blogging network is the money's all going to be pulled into implementing this idea of personal robots and stuff for people. Like if you're like me, when you're a kid, you used to watch the Jetsons, and you're like, you know, where's my video phone? Well, now we have that with like Skype and Hangouts. And then you're thinking, well, where's my flying car? Well, I'm sure they're working on that somewhere too. But then you remember Rosie, the robot maid. Well, I don't know about you, but definitely I am waiting to get my hands on the Rosie, my own personal robot, to be able to do all these unsavory tasks that I don't like to do, like dishes or whatever. Like we have dishwashers, which are kind of like robots that do that for us. There's the Roomba that will vacuum for you, but I'm looking forward to having lots more robots in our lives. And I think on Monday, we're going to take the angle of the fear angle, because a lot of people out there have fear of what, like the potential of artificial intelligence somehow taking over. And we just want to probably on Monday discuss how that's unrealistic. It's a science fiction nightmare that's been concocted by the people that own this planet and want to keep humanity enslaved, doing these menial tasks that should all be being done by robots. So we'll wrap it up. Our Hangout our next little activity is starting here in like less than 1 minute. So we're going to go jump on that, and hopefully we'll see you all there, and you get some really valuable training and information. This particular Hangout is something that was recorded live in Miami a few weeks ago, and it's packed full of valuable information that can help you with whatever business you're involved with, and it's definitely going to help us with reaching our goals for freedom for humanity through the aid of robots. So we'll leave it at that. Have an amazing day. Any last thoughts, Larry?
I don't know. I'm looking forward to the next one too, because we have so many problems with the internet connection, which will soon be solved by the outer net.
Right. Yeah, we talked about that. Oh, and just to mention too, if you want more information about patents, if you go through the channel, the YouTube channel where these Hangouts are, there is a whole Hangout that we did specifically talking about patents, if you're interested in that, because Larry did touch on that tonight. So come and hang out with us on Monday, same time, same place, 8 p.m. Eastern, and we'll be sharing our vision for robots and how awesome it's going to be, and there's nothing to fear. So make it a great day. We'll see you on Monday, and if I don't see you in the future, I will see you out in the pasture. All right, bye everybody. Thanks for watching.
Think and grow rich, everybody.